Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Scientist. I'm glad you're here, whether you've had a long day, a busy mind, or you simply love falling asleep to the sound of science. Tonight we drift toward a small, unassuming place, one that doesn't always exist, at least not in the way we think of existence. Imagine an island, but not the kind you circle on a map or find with a guidebook. This one slips in and out of being like a mirage. One month it's there, covered in pale sand and birdsong. The next, it's simply gone. Swallowed by waves, returned to the sea like a dream forgotten by morning. The locals call it by different names, depending on the coast and the culture. Some see it as a ghost, others a gift. Scientists, with their meters and models, call it a tidal island, a barrier shoal, a shifting sandbar. But no matter the title, the story remains, it disappears, and returns again, with clockwork rhythm and mysterious calm. So tonight, we're going there. Not on a plane or a boat, but the way sleepy scientists do, through story and slow, curious wonder. You'll travel by moonlight and tide wind, and whisper gently gliding past sand dunes and silent crabs as we unravel the quiet science of the island that doesn't always stay. But before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? What time is it there? Are you tucked beneath blankets or lying on a couch, maybe letting the sea of your own thoughts settle? Let me know in the comments when you're feeling cozy enough to share. If you enjoy these sleepy explorations, I'd be so grateful if you gave the video a little like and tap that subscribe button. It helps more sleepy scientists like you find their way here, and it means I can keep making more of these journeys for you now. Now then, you're hovering above a quiet stretch of coastline, a gentle inlet shaped like a sleeping hand. The stars are mirrored in the tide, and just offshore something new is forming, a thin line of sand rising from the waves like the beginning of a breath. It's subtle at first, barely more than a ripple. But by morning, the ripple becomes a mound, and then a crescent, and finally a small island floats where there was nothing just hours before. It seems impossible, doesn't it? That land can appear like this. That something as heavy as sand and rock can be carried, piled, assembled by water and air alone. But the earth has always been more fluid than it appears. This island is not pinned to bedrock. It has no roots. Its bones are shifting sands gathered from nearby shallows and distant coasts swept here by winds and longshore currents. The sea builds it like a child with a fistful of wet clay, pressing and shaping, then washing away to begin again. As you drift closer, you can almost feel the softness of the ground underfoot, not quite stable, like walking on a memory. Seagulls circle above, curious but unafraid, and somewhere in the distance the tide begins its slow return. Already the edges of the island darken as waves lap against its flanks. You wonder, how long will it last? Days, weeks. And how does it know when to vanish? Of course, it doesn't know in the way we know things, but it responds to moon and wind, to storms and temperature, to subtle pulls and pressures most of us forget are even there. And maybe you begin to wonder about your own rhythms, your own vanishing places. Are there parts of you that rise only when conditions are just right? Memories that surface once a year, then slip away again. Tonight you'll walk the shoreline of a place, caught between presence and absence. An island with no address and no intention of staying. And in doing so, you'll see just how alive the world is, even in the things that come and go. The shape of the island begins to emerge more clearly beneath the stars. It curves slightly like a soft smile etched in sand. Its outline shifts with each passing hour, every wave tucking in a corner or stealing a scoop from the shore. It's like watching a sculptor at work, one who never stops moving, never rests, and never insists on permanence. The island is small, no bigger than a few soccer fields side by side, though sometimes it grows or shrinks by half, depending on the tide. You walk its edge and feel the ground sigh beneath your feet, grains slipping just slightly, the way flour moves under a spoon. There's no path here because every step resets what came before. It's a place that forgets and welcomes you all at once. You crouch near the waterline, where the wet sand glistens under a pale moon. The air smells of salt and new beginnings. Tiny bubbles rise from beneath the surface, as if the island is exhaling slowly, and then you spot them, small spiraling tracks etched in the sand. Hermit crabs, perhaps, or sand snails going about their lives as if the world doesn't vanish beneath them. This place is never the same 2 nights in a row. What makes a landmass like this able to disappear and return again? You begin to picture it not as a fixed shape, but as a rhythm, a breath the earth is taking in and out with each lunar month, each season, each storm. The science behind it begins with sediment transport. Along coastlines, particles of sand silt and tiny shells are constantly being moved by waves, by currents, by the wind. And when the conditions align just right, enough sand, low wave energy, a protective bay or reef, the materials begin to pile up. Layer by layer, a mound forms beneath the surface. If the tide is low or the winds calm, the top of that mound breaches the water. And for a few hours, or days, or even weeks, you have an island. It's called a sandbar if it stays mostly submerged, a tidal island if it vanishes during high tide, but reveals itself when the sea retreats, and a barrier island if it's large enough to remain above water. Most of the time, though even these shift, constantly migrating sideways over decades like lazy ghosts. This particular island, the one you're dreaming through tonight, may go by a different name depending on which coast it kisses. In parts of Japan, it's a sacred place that vanishes with the storm season. In the southern coasts of Bangladesh and India, disappearing islands dot the Sundarbans, created by river sediment and lost to rising tides. In Alaska, small islands form and fade with the push of seasonal ice melt. Even in the middle of the Pacific, some islands vanish with volcanic reshaping or coral reef collapse. But what ties them all together is their impermanence and the quiet beauty of that fact. You glance behind you and already the footprints you made a few moments ago are gone. Smoothed out by a trickle of water, curling over the surface like a ribbon of silver. The island is erasing even your memory of arrival. Not out of cruelty, but because this place is never meant to hold anything for long. It asks nothing from you. It only invites you to be present, to notice. And you do. You watch the way the sand seems to hum under the breeze, tiny ripples forming and shifting like skin under silk. You listen to the hush of foam on shore and the hollow gurgle of air escaping below the surface. And you feel something odd but comforting. You don't mind that this island will disappear. It doesn't feel tragic. It feels peaceful. Perhaps because you start to understand that this is how the world works, that most things aren't permanent. Not really. Mountains crumble, rivers shift, even the continents drift glacially slow but unrelenting. So why should an island made of wind and time and tide try to stay still? Maybe there's a lesson here whispered through the curl of water against your ankle that the value of a thing isn't in how long it lasts, but in how fully it exists while it's here. You look out at the horizon where the stars meet the sea, and you feel that this place is alive, even in its vanishing. You remain on the island now, ankle-deep in the hush of midnight tide, as the shoreline stretches and contracts around you like a sleepy heartbeat. The more you observe, the more surreal it feels, how something so solid beneath your feet can also be so fleeting. And yet this is no illusion. This is physics. geography, a little poetry maybe, but also science. You begin to notice the invisible architecture beneath the surface. The way this island forms isn't a magic trick. It's a masterpiece of hydrodynamics, of sediment balances, and long, slow conversations between wind and wave. You close your eyes and imagine Earth's forces not as chaos, but as painters and builders working together, laying each grain in place. At its core, the phenomenon of this vanishing island is governed by dynamic equilibrium, a scientific term that, despite sounding stiff, is quite romantic in practice. It means that forces are always pushing and pulling, building and breaking in a constant shifting balance. The ocean brings in sand with one tide, then takes it away with the next. It's like a celestial game of give and take, and the island is what remains. For a little while, you wonder, how does it all stay together? It helps to think of the underwater world as always sculpting, especially in shallow coastal zones. Currents sweep sand into piles called shoals, soft undersea dunes. If those piles grow tall enough and the tide pulls back, they briefly rise into view, creating the illusion of land. But it's not truly anchored. Beneath the surface, the grains are always ready to move again. Sometimes these sandbanks emerge for just a few hours at low tide. Sometimes, with the help of seasonal currents or storm surges, they linger for days or weeks. But the sea always returns. That's the promise and the poetry of a tidal island. And here's something stranger. Still, satellite imagery often captures these islands better than the human eye. Scientists can see the repeated patterns of birth and vanishing from space, watching the outlines of these sandy forms bloom like ghost lilies on the ocean surface, then fade again. Each year, some appear in the exact same shape. Others look completely different, as if the sea is trying something new. That unpredictability. It's part of the system. These are not mistakes. These are fluid landforms. Responsive, not fixed. They are part of the Earth's way of distributing sediment, of reshaping its coastal skin in response to windwave energy and sea level. You walk a little further and feel your feet cool with each step. The sand is saturated here, slick and cold, like stepping on the surface of a slowly breathing creature. The water laps higher on the shore than it did earlier. The island is already beginning to fade. You find yourself wondering what makes this particular place, the one you're drifting across tonight, so good at reappearing. And the answer may lie in 3 ingredients. 1. Ample sediment supply. There must be enough material sand, silt shell in the nearby system to feed the island's body. 2. Protective surroundings. Bays, lagoons, or coral reefs often buffer wave energy, allowing fragile forms to grow. 3. A precise tidal rhythm, enough time between high tides for the land to form, and gentle enough tides to not sweep it all away too quickly. It's a miracle of coordination, like trying to build a castle while the waves are still rolling in. And yet the earth pulls it off again and again. It makes you think about timing in your own life. How many things are simply a result of arriving at the right moment? A decision made during emotional low tide. A friendship that surfaced when conditions were just right. How many parts of us are temporary islands rising and falling in the flow? You reach down and scoop a handful of damp sand, letting it trickle through your fingers. Each grain feels ancient, broken from stone, carried by rivers, tumbled by waves. It's taken a long journey to get here, just to rest on this brief little patch of earth. You begin to feel the same way, a drifting piece of something larger, pausing here for a time. No need to rush, no need to hold on too tightly. Just rest. For tonight the island is here. That's enough. The tide is turning now, subtle at first, like a thought slowly forming in the back of your mind. The water draws inward, curling higher across the edges of the island. It's not rushing or loud, no fanfare, just a hush and a hum and the soft return of the sea. You glance toward the sky, and there it is, the moon hanging like a quiet guardian in the dark. Pale and full, or maybe just a gentle crescent tonight. Either way, it watches everything. You begin to feel its pull not just on the waves, but on your thoughts, your breath, your very mood. It's no wonder the island answers to it too. The moon's gravity reaches down across space, stirring the oceans as if they were liquid silk. Its pull causes the rise and fall of tides, a rhythm so ancient it predates memory. But here on this vanishing island, that rhythm isn't just background noise, it's the heartbeat of the land itself. You imagine the moon not as a rock in the sky, but as an invisible hand, gently lifting and lowering the oceans with each breath. And each time the water falls just enough, the island appears. A brief pause between the exhale and the next inhale. There are 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day in most places on Earth, a cycle called a semi-diurnal tide. But not all tides are equal. Their height and power shift depending on the moon's position relative to the Earth and Sun. During a new or full moon, when the Earth, Moon, and Sun align, their combined gravity causes spring tides, the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. These are the moments when this fragile island has its best chance of rising above the waterline. A few weeks later, during first or third quarter moon, the gravitational forces partially cancel out. These gentler neap tides make for smaller differences between high and low tide, sometimes too small for the island to break the surface at all. You realize something beautiful about this relationship. The island doesn't decide when to appear. It's summoned by celestial rhythm. The moon choreographs its dance with the sea, and the island is just one of the steps. It makes you wonder, are there parts of your life that respond to cycles you don't even notice? Maybe creativity that comes and goes, moods that rise like tides, or moments of clarity that only surface when everything else pulls away. The island is teaching you something without speaking a word, and the moon continues its patient orbit, never rushing, never pausing. Around the Earth every 27.3 days, but our tides follow a 29.5-day cycle linked more closely to the moon's phases than its physical orbit. The mathematics of that timing creates the island's mysterious reappearance schedule. In some coastal regions, the island may emerge only during spring tides. In others, it reappears more regularly, but only for an hour or two at each low tide. Sometimes it looks different, each time, wider, narrower, or moved entirely by a storm or a shifting current. It's like watching a stage being slowly built, used for a moment, then gently dismantled. And here's something even more curious. If you stood still and watched the tide turn, you might see the island slowly melt away. The edge blurs, first waves sneaking in like sleepy fingers. Pools form in the center. Tiny rivulets twist across the sand. It becomes more water than land. Then, as if shy about overstaying its welcome, it slips away beneath the tide. But not before leaving behind tiny signs, a piece of driftwood, a shell, a few bird tracks. Proof that it was real, that it was here, that it mattered. You sit on a slight rise still above water for now and close your eyes. You imagine the moon's gravity brushing gently against the earth, just enough to cradle a continent or lift an ocean inch by inch. And you feel so small, but not in a frightening way. Small like a grain of sand resting in the palm of something vast. Small like a note in a long, slow song. And that song plays on moon and sea island, and tide always shifting, always returning, always letting go. You rise slowly, brushing the sand from your hands, though it clings with stubborn softness, as if it wants to stay with you just a little longer. The air has shifted slightly cooler, more awake. A faint breeze moves in from the open sea, sweeping across the island like an invisible artist with a delicate brush. Now you begin to notice another quiet force shaping the land, the wind. Unlike the tides which pulse in predictable lunar rhythms, the wind is a bit more playful, chaotic, shifting, unpredictable. It doesn't follow a perfect clock, but it does have patterns. Seasonal winds, coastal breezes, storm gusts all leave fingerprints on this fragile place. You pause and listen, not to noise, but to movement. There's a faint hiss as grains of sand tumble across the surface, tiny avalanches carried by the breeze. You watch as ripples form, then disappear, then form again in different places. The ground itself seems alive. This is Aeolian transport, the way wind lifts and rolls sand particles across the surface. Each grain is light enough to be moved, but heavy enough to settle quickly. It's a dance one performed billions of times per second all across the beach. Wind builds up dunes, tears them down, smooths sharp edges into curves, and carries bits of the island far out to sea, only to bring them back weeks later. You start to see the island not as a place, but as a memory made of moving parts. And the wind, though soft tonight, is a powerful sculptor. Even at low speeds, around 10 to 15 kilometers per hour, the breeze can move loose sand in visible sheets, especially when the grains are dry. In stronger gusts, it can shift whole dunes overnight. Imagine a landform with no anchor, one that drifts just slightly, every day, not enough for a map to notice, but enough for a crab to have to find a new burrow. The island accepts this. It allows itself to be remade again and again. You follow a finger of the shore, where a long stretch of sand has formed a miniature peninsula. You realize it wasn't there earlier. The wind sculpted it over just a few hours, bringing new grains in from the east, stacking them into a curved reach toward the water. It feels like watching time work in real life, not in years or decades, but minutes. The wind also plays a strange double role. It both destroys and protects. On some coasts, seasonal winds carry protective offshore breezes, pushing back incoming waves, calming erosion, giving the island room to rise. In other places, strong onshore gusts bring storms, tearing the surface apart and reshuffling it elsewhere. You begin to see the wind as a sculptor with moods, some days gentle, some fierce, some full of creative joy, others in a hurry to clear the canvas. And yet, through all this, life endures. You spot it now, tiny holes dotting the sand like dimples. The homes of small sand crabs tucked away beneath the surface. At night they scuttle out to forage and explore, only to retreat when the wind picks up or the tide returns. They too are shaped by this rhythm, building homes in sand that may vanish tomorrow. Yet they do it anyway. Not because they expect permanence, but because it's enough to be here now. That thought lingers in your chest. It softens something. You turn your face to the breeze and let it pass through your hair, over your skin, across your thoughts. It carries with it the scent of salt and distant rain, the trace of forests far inland, the ghost of another shore. You're reminded that wind is always arriving from somewhere, always going somewhere else. It never stays. But while it's here, it touches everything. And just like that, the wind shifts, a little stronger, a little cooler. The sand stirs once again. Another change is coming. And the island, ever the patient partner, responds without fear. The stars are beginning to drift lower now, and a faint blush of light teases the horizon. Morning is far off still, but the darkness has softened. You move inland, though. On a place like this, inland is a generous word. There's barely enough room for your thoughts to stretch before reaching the opposite shore. Yet as you step gently across the middle of the island, you feel something quietly powerful happening beneath your feet. It's not just wind and tide at work here. The waves themselves, the steady breathing pulse of the ocean, are playing their part in the island's story. The sea does not simply arrive and retreat. It builds and dismantles with every motion. And here, where land is barely taller than the water that surrounds it, that push and pull becomes the very language of change. You pause and listen again. The hush of the waves isn't just calming, it's constructive. Each ripple carries energy. When waves roll in from the open sea, they bring sand with them. When they roll out, they may carry it away. The shape of the island is a reflection of this balance. This process is known as longshore drift, a sideways movement of sand along the coast caused by waves approaching at an angle. Think of it as the ocean brushing its fingers across the shoreline, pulling sand gently from one place and tucking it into another. Over time, this creates spitz bars and the very island you're walking now. And it's not only left or right, it's also vertical. During calm conditions, small waves tend to deposit sand gently building up the beach. But during storms, high-energy waves can erode entire sections of shoreline in hours. The sea takes what it once gave, and the island must begin again. You crouch near a tide pool that wasn't here earlier. It glints in the moonlight, still and shallow. Inside, tiny creatures drift, plankton maybe, or fragments of seaweed. The pool formed in a depression left by the last retreating wave, a quiet reminder that even the smallest indentations hold meaning. This moment, too, is shaped by wave refraction, how waves bend as they approach shallow water, slowing down and changing direction. It's like watching light curve through glass, only instead of beams, it's water, and instead of glass, it's sand. The way the wave hits the island shapes where it deposits or erodes material. Over time, this gentle dance of motion creates those beautiful crescent shapes you sometimes see from above. Barrier islands curled like smiles, pointing toward the coast. But this isn't a closed system. The sea is constantly responding to energy inputs. Storms, wind shifts, melting glaciers, even distant earthquakes that send ripples across entire oceans. It makes you think how many things in life are shaped not just by what's nearby, but by distant forces we never see. Maybe some of your thoughts have been formed by moments you don't remember. Maybe emotions drifted into your mind like sediment, carried by far-off waves. The earth feels the same. It responds to what's near and what's impossibly far. And here, on this fragile island, you stand in the middle of that echo. You reach out and trail your fingers through the edge of the tide. The water is cool, a little foamy, fragrant with salt and invisible stories. In the distance, you hear a low rumble, the suggestion of larger waves rolling in from farther out. They might arrive in an hour or tomorrow. But the island already knows. Its shape will shift. The southern edge might dissolve. The northern tip might stretch. And in some places, it might rise even taller, piling on new material brought by those stronger waves. It's all part of a system, one without judgment, without permanence, without resistance. You wonder quietly, what would it feel like to be shaped by change, but not afraid of it? To accept erosion and still grow. This island shows you how, because even now as the waves lick at its edges and the currents churn below, it does not cling or protest. It simply moves, flexes, responds. It is not weak, it is adaptable, and in that, it is stronger than stone. You lie back gently in the cool sand and let the rumble of the waves lull you. Each crash is both an end and a beginning, and the island continues its quiet work beneath the stars. You stir, slightly lulled by the rhythmic hush of waves brushing the shore, and the softness of damp sand cradling your weight. Above you, the sky still holds tonight, though the stars are beginning to blink out one by one, as if shyly retreating before dawn. The surface beneath you is still land for now. But deeper down in the layers hidden beneath your resting body, life continues in quiet, industrious ways. This island isn't empty. Beneath the sand lies a bustling secret world. Tiny creatures make their homes here, carving tunnels, breathing through grains, and navigating a space that disappears and reappears with the tide. You sit up slowly and picture the unseen landscape below. It's a kind of microcosmic city, a vertical maze of burrows and chambers built not of brick or wood, but of sand and instinct. And it's teeming with residents who have evolved not just to survive the island's vanishing act, but to depend on it. Start with the ghost crab, a small, pale creature with stalked eyes and remarkable speed. By day, it hides in spiral burrows dug deep enough to remain damp-safe from predators and sunlight. By night, it emerges cautiously, like a dream, testing the air, searching for detritus and organic scraps left by the tide. It lives a life in rhythm with the moon. Then there are lugworms, not often seen, but always present, coiling beneath the surface in mucus-lined tunnels. They eat sand, filtering out nutrients from microscopic organic matter. When they finish digesting, they leave behind castings, those little curly sand piles you may have stepped over without knowing their story. Coquina clams, tiny and jewel-like, use the swash zone like a public train. As each wave rolls over them, they dig into the wet sand, only to be pushed forward and buried again with the next. It's a never-ending ride up and down the beach. And far smaller still, meiofauna, creatures like nematodes and copepods, tinier than grains of sand, slipping between particles in a world that to them feels endless. They feed on bacteria, algae, and decaying matter, forming a bridge between the microscopic and the visible. You marvel at the fact that all these beings live here in this place that is never still, never certain. How do they cope with being buried by waves, uncovered by wind, swallowed and revealed again? The answer is, they don't fight it. They are made for change, for vanishing and returning. Their bodies are adapted to low oxygen, high salt, sudden flooding, and total exposure. It is not a hardship, it's home. And perhaps in that quiet way, nature often whispers wisdom. You realize something deeper. Resilience doesn't always look like resistance. Sometimes it's about yielding, flowing, adapting. Sometimes the strongest thing a creature or a person can do is let go and reform. You trail your hand through the sand and imagine the little lives beneath your fingers. A hermit crab slowly moving its shell home to higher ground. A clam feeling the pull of saltwater return. The soft sigh of burrow walls collapsing and being rebuilt. This island has no skyscrapers, no roads, no maps. But it has stories. Entire generations of life lived out in hours. You wonder, have you ever lived somewhere like this, not geographically, but emotionally? A season in your life that felt temporary, constantly shifting beneath you, offering no firm ground. Maybe you're in one now, and maybe that's okay. Because here, where the earth is made of memory and movement, you begin to see that stability isn't the only path to peace. There is also grace in transition. You breathe in slow and full, letting the salt, heavy air fill your lungs. It smells faintly of seaweed and motion. You feel the sand move slightly under you, just a breath, just a tremble, a reminder that the tide is on its way back. Soon this place will be underwater again. But beneath that temporary silence, life will go on. The crabs will burrow deeper. The worms will wait. The clams will ride the waves. And when the water pulls back once more, they will rise again, just like the island. just like you. Your fingers trace idle patterns in the sand, now spirals, lines, a sleepy constellation of touch. Somewhere nearby, a wave sighs and recedes, tugging gently at the toes of the island. The edge of land has grown thinner, narrower, softened by the steady return of the tide. But still the island remains for now. You stand and look toward its center. It's hardly elevated, just a gentle rise no more than a meter above sea level. But that tiny difference is everything. It means the difference between appearing and disappearing, between sky and sea. And that rise, it's not just sand. It's shaped by the subtle, powerful hand of vegetation. Yes, even here on an island that disappears, there are plants. Not many, and not everywhere, but a few quiet pioneers have taken root in this moving world. You spot a thin patch of beach grass, its green blades barely swaying in the breeze. These aren't the lush meadows of valleys or the towering trees of forests. These are survivors, halophytes, salt-tolerant, sun-loving, deeply rooted species that thrive where other plants fail. And they do something miraculous. They help the island hold itself together. You crouch beside a tuft of Ammophila, also known as marram grass, and notice how its long roots twist downward into the sand, gripping deep, anchoring the surface like a secret web. These roots aren't just feeding the plant, they're stitching the island's surface together. It's a gentle resistance, nothing aggressive, but meaningful. The presence of even a few plants can change the fate of a place like this. Their root systems reduce erosion, slow the wind, and encourage more sand to accumulate. Over time, this creates the potential for dune formation miniature hills that offer slightly higher, more stable ground. And that little bit of elevation might mean the difference between the island surviving a storm or washing away entirely. You notice something else too. The plants seem to appear mostly near the island's center, where the water reaches less often. It's as if the plants have learned the boundaries, sensed where it's safe to grow, where to try again after each tide. Some species like Salicornia or sea purslane can even survive submersion for short periods. When the island disappears beneath the tide, these tiny green architects simply go still, waiting patiently for their world to return. It makes you wonder, how do they know when to grow, when to rest? The answer lies in photoperiodism, plants' ability to sense the length of daylight and adapt their cycles accordingly. Combined with their sensitivity to moisture and salinity, they form an elegant biological clock responding to the rhythm of light and sea. You brush your hand over the surface of a leaf, and it's waxy, built that way to retain moisture and repel salt spray. Adaptation written into every cell. And then you think, what if resilience isn't just about surviving hard things, but knowing when to grow again? The plants teach this lesson without saying a word. They don't rush. They don't bloom all at once. They simply try again, slowly, quietly, in the places where they sense they might belong. And when enough plants take root, just a handful at first, they begin to change the rules of the island. Wind slows as it passes through the grasses. More sand accumulates. Water drains differently. What was once bare and shifting becomes little by little a place that remembers its shape. You imagine looking down from above, a slow-motion time-lapse of the island over months, years. First a patch of grass, then two, then a dune, a colony of clams, a gathering of seabirds, all drawn to this persistent scrap of land. And it strikes you. The island isn't just appearing and disappearing. It's learning, not with thought or words, but through process, through patience, through the layering of effort by wind, wave, root, and time. And isn't that what growth really is? Not instant transformation, but tiny, unnoticed changes built one on top of another until the shape becomes something new, something stronger, something that can last a little longer next time. A breeze passes through the grass, now whispering over the sand like a lullaby. The plants sway gently, never resisting. They bend, they move, they survive, and the island breathes in their rhythm. You wander to the northern edge now, where the sand grows looser and the sea seems bolder. Waves touch this part of the island with less hesitation, like an old friend nudging you awake. You feel a quiet reverence standing here. Something about this stretch feels like a threshold, not just of land and water, but of time itself. Because what lies beyond this island, just beneath the waves, is the submerged landscape, the ghost of the island's larger self. The part that remains underwater, most of the time, even when the dry crest briefly appears. And it is far from empty. You gaze out at the water and imagine the land hidden just below the surface. It stretches outward in gentle shoals, sandbars, reef patches, and low ridges, all connected like an invisible skeleton beneath this sleepy island's skin. These submerged parts are called the intertidal zone and the subtidal flats. During low tide, the upper layer is exposed, often revealing glistening mud, pooled water, and sometimes whole networks of ridges and channels. During high tide, it vanishes again, wrapped in salt water, like a secret. And yet life thrives there. Beneath the thin veil of the ocean, you'll find seagrass meadows waving like underwater fields. You may not see them tonight, but they're there rooted, swaying, filtering the water, stabilizing sediment, and hosting a carnival of marine life. Seagrasses aren't seaweed. They're true flowering plants. They produce oxygen. They photosynthesize. They serve as nurseries for juvenile fish crabs and mollusks, providing both food and shelter. Even dugongs and sea turtles rely on them, grazing quietly like cows on an endless ocean pasture. And they're patient. They grow slowly. Some seagrass meadows are centuries-old anchors of continuity in a shifting coastal world. You ask yourself, how can something invisible from above be so important to what lies above it? The answer becomes clear as you consider the way these submerged zones shape the island's fate. They break the force of waves, allowing the sand to settle. They absorb energy from storms, reducing erosion. And they hold nutrients that help spark new life each time the island rises again. It's like discovering the roots of a floating thought. Everything you see above is made possible by what exists below. You take a few careful steps into the shallow surf, letting the water curl around your ankles. The sand here is firmer, heavier with moisture. And with each wave, tiny bits of shell and seagrass slide across your feet. You picture the seafloor as a quilt of motion, not just seagrass, but also diatom-rich sediments, plankton, and bacteria that glow faintly under certain moonlit conditions, a marine world that sometimes brushes the surface in the form of bioluminescence. Can you imagine this same island glowing at night, a shimmering outline pulsing blue beneath your step? That happens sometimes. In places like the Maldives, Puerto Rico, or Vietnam islands, and shallows bloom with light when disturbed. Caused by dinoflagellates, microscopic organisms that emit a flash when stirred, it's as if the ocean answers your presence with quiet applause. Tonight, perhaps it's too cold, too calm. But even without the glow, you can feel the hum of something more. You close your eyes and sense the continuity, the way this moment connects to an entire unseen world, one that's pulsing with life just beneath your reach. And that's the gift of these submerged zones. They hold memory. Even when the surface is wiped clean, even when the island disappears entirely, the seafloor remembers. It cradles the shape of what once was and what may be again. Sometimes it even leaves a hint for future generations, tiny shells, patterns of ridges, or a ghostly outline only visible at extreme low tide. And you wonder, what kind of memory do you leave behind when your surface changes? Maybe not every version of you is visible at all times, but the depth beneath your unseen self still shapes the rise and return of what you become. The sea stirs again at your feet, a soft invitation to return to the higher ground. The island will not last much longer, but as you step back, you feel something sacred about this submerged world, a promise that even in disappearance, there is continuity. Even in silence, something holds you. You step away from the water's edge, now your footprints filling slowly behind you. The sea is more insistent, each wave tugging just a little harder, climbing a little farther inland. Soon this place will be underwater once again. But before it vanishes completely, there is one last companion to meet. Overhead you hear it, before you see it. A flutter, a call, a dip in the dark sky. A bird gliding, low wings stretched like paper lanterns held aloft by the breeze. Then another, and another. They have found the island too. Even this impermanent speck in the sea is a waypoint, a resting place for migratory birds who fly farther than you can imagine. Birds who cross oceans, who chase summer between hemispheres, who memorize coastlines that change every year. Tonight, you are witnessing a quiet miracle of instinct and timing. This island, so small, so temporary, has become a hotel, a restaurant, a safe perch for wings that have flown thousands of kilometers. Take the bar-tailed godwit, for instance. It holds the record for the longest, non-stop migratory flight, nearly 12,000 kilometers, without landing from Alaska to New Zealand. And yet birds like these still rely on tiny stops along the way, coastal islands, sandbanks, marshes. Lose one and their whole journey unravels. Even a vanishing island matters. You sit in the sand barely above the surf line now and watch the silhouettes wheel and glide against the starlit sky. They call softly to one another, brief chirps, sleepy whistles before settling into the sand. Just for a moment, just until dawn. Their presence speaks of something powerful, trust in the island. Despite its impermanence, they land here. They rest, they refuel, and then they fly on. You find yourself wondering, what tells them this place is safe? Do they remember it, or do they simply sense it? Some combination of magnetic fields, polarized light, inherited memory. Their navigational system remains partly a mystery, but what's known is this: they depend on these habitats. And these habitats, in turn, depend on the rhythm of tides, currents, and sediment. When all those pieces align, the island forms. And when the island forms, the birds arrive. It's a beautiful equation. Fleeting land plus ancient wings equals survival. You spot a cluster of terns, now huddled together like a dream stitched into feathers. One preens. One tucks its head beneath a wing. Another simply watches the tide unbothered by the sea's slow advance. You notice their feet make shallow imprints in the sand, tiny delicate hieroglyphs, soon to be erased by water. And yet they leave them anyway, because sometimes leaving a mark isn't about permanence. It's about presence. That idea sits with you. You think about all the things in your life you've tried to hold on to preserve, to control. And yet here are these birds resting on a surface they know will vanish, and still they close their eyes and sleep. Perhaps that's a kind of wisdom. Because the value of a moment isn't tied to how long it lasts. It's in how deeply it nourishes, how fully it's lived. Even a brief rest on an island that won't be here tomorrow can mean survival. Peace. A breath that carries you to the next chapter. The wind shifts again. The sand around you flattens with moisture. The sea is only meters away now, and still the birds do not rush. They know when to leave. Somewhere inside, so do you. But not yet. For now, you lie back once more, and let the sounds of feathers, waves, and wind wrap around you like a blanket. Above, a tern glides past the moon. Below, the island holds your shape just a little longer. You stir gently the hush of the sea, now deeper, rounder, as if the waves themselves have grown sleepier. The island is shrinking, not in a way that alarms, but like a sandcastle nearing the end of a child's dreamy afternoon. You feel no sadness, only awe at how gracefully it surrenders. And now your attention shifts once again, this time toward the sky, because what appears above the island isn't just backdrop, it's part of the rhythm. The atmosphere here is a participant, not a spectator. The wind, the clouds, the moisture, the light, they all collaborate with the ocean to create, reveal, and eventually erase this place. You tip your head back. High above, streaks of cirrus clouds stretch thin across the stars. They're made of ice crystals floating at altitudes of over 6,000 meters. Wispy and translucent, they glide slowly, shaped by jet streams. Tonight they glow faintly in the moonlight, like sleep lines in the sky. They signal fair weather for now, but cirrus clouds often arrive a day or two before a change. A front, a storm. Perhaps the island senses that too. Lower down, scattered stratus clouds drift closer to the horizon. These are the soft grays that blanket the sky at dawn and dusk, wrapping the world in a kind of quiet. The island's moisture evaporating from the sand, lifted from tidal pools, caught in the breath of seagrasses, joins the sky molecule by molecule. Each wisp of cloud may carry pieces of this place. And on certain nights, if the conditions align, the whole island may vanish beneath coastal fog, a phenomenon called advection fog, where warm, moist air meets cooler sea surfaces. It rolls in gently, wrapping everything in a hush so complete, even sound feels padded. Imagine standing here as the fog descends, sight-blurred sound soften the border between land and sea, erased. Even your own outline might seem like a memory. The island, invisible to satellites' maps or passing ships, becomes entirely secret, a whispered dream in a sea of breath. And this fog doesn't just hide, it shapes. The moisture it leaves behind settles into the sand, encouraging seed germination, aiding the tiny crabs, dampening the surface enough to reduce erosion. On a disappearing island, even fog nurtures. It makes you wonder how many soft things we ignore or overlook, quietly hold the world together. Raindrops that never fall, breezes that never howl, vapors that cool instead of burn. And what of the light? You open your eyes just in time to see the moon dipping closer to the horizon. It's nearly full tonight, casting shadows across the sand, illuminating each ripple as if traced in silver. On some nights when the moon is smaller or shyer, the island feels more intimate. But tonight, under this confident moon, everything glows. You can even see the lunar halo forming a ring of light 22 degrees from the moon's center. It's caused by ice crystals high in the atmosphere, bending moonlight into a circle. A gentle optical illusion born from geometry and moisture. And it reminds you, even the moon is shaped by the air. Light bent by ice writes secret rings in the sky. Below it, the island softens. The edges blur where the sand meets the sea. It's already begun the slow, quiet surrender to the tide's return. But as it fades, it glows brighter. A final shimmer, a sigh, a promise. The birds have mostly gone now. Only a few linger, fluffing their feathers as if reluctant to say goodbye. The plants are still, the crabs hidden, the seagrass resting beneath the surf. And you feel more present than ever. Not because the island is lasting, but because it isn't. Its very impermanence is what anchors you to the moment. You press your palm to the damp sand and close your eyes once more. Above you, the moon. Around you, fog. Beneath you, a breathing earth that rises only long enough to remind you how beautiful now can be. You lie still, the sand beneath you, now cool and heavy with moisture. The sea has grown bold, its edge licking at your feet like an eager messenger. It's almost time. But before the island fully slips away, you take one last walk across its narrowing spine, feeling every rise and dip as if memorizing a dear friend's face. You think again about the mechanics behind this island's vanishing act, the precise invisible dance of earth, moon, and sun. For the tides, after all, are not random. They are the result of gravity, of mass pulling on mass of planets, whispering to each other across the vastness of space. The island is shaped by lunar tides, those gentle yet mighty bulges of ocean that move across the globe each day as the moon tugs on Earth's oceans. When the moon is overhead or directly opposite, the pull creates a high tide, swelling the water toward the moon's gravity. Tonight, the moon is nearly full, which means the Earth, moon, and sun are almost in line. This alignment causes spring tides when the tidal range, the difference between high and low tide, is at its greatest, not named for the season, but for how the tide springs forth. And when spring tides come, the island all but disappears. You watch now as the first full wash of seawater spills over the southern edge, erasing a stretch of beach that was dry just minutes ago. No drama, no violence, just motion. Still, the physics behind it is profound. The moon, orbiting 400 kilometers away, exerts enough force to lift billions of tons of water into motion. It does this every day without fail. It's the most powerful silent partner in the island's story. But there's more. The sun, despite being far more massive, has a lesser effect due to its greater distance. Yet when its pull aligns with the moon, it amplifies the tide's reach. A perfect celestial collaboration. You imagine standing in space looking down on Earth's oceans. You'd see bulges of water following the moon as it moves. You'd see continents cutting through those bulges, causing water to rise and fall along their coasts. And here, where the bulge swells and retreats twice daily, the island blinks in and out of view. Not just once in a while, not every few years, twice a day, every day. It's a rhythm ancient and unwavering. The sea comes, the sea goes, and in that rhythm the island lives its life, ephemeral but consistent. A paradox of nature. You wade a few steps into the shallows, now lapping at your ankles, and feel the gravity of the moon in action. Not as a pull, but as a presence, a cosmic metronome steady as breath. The deeper you go, the more the sand slips beneath your feet, water folding over itself in soft layers. You pause and look back. The central rise is thinner now, fringed by pools and scattered driftwood. It will all be gone in less than an hour. And yet you feel no urgency, because the tides don't erase, they renew. Each retreat leaves behind something new, a line of shells, a twist of seaweed, the impression of a crab's scurry. Even erosion makes space for rebuilding. The island is never exactly the same, but it always returns. You wonder, are there parts of yourself that vanish and reappear just like this? Versions of you that submerge only to rise again later in new light. Perhaps change isn't always a loss. Perhaps it's tidal. Maybe there's a version of you that needs to rest underwater for a while. That's okay. Like the island, you're allowed to disappear, to sink beneath the surface, knowing you'll rise again when the moon is right. You walk back to the center now, just a thin dimpled ridge remaining above the tide. The moon casts a perfect reflection across the water, like a pathway leading home. And the stars, oh, the stars, they flicker softly, like breath held in the sky. The island isn't gone yet. It lingers for a few final heartbeats. and you stay with it present, still held between gravity and light. Because this is the miracle. Not that the island disappears, but that it always comes back. The water has now climbed past your knees. Around you, the island has shrunk to a whisper, just a soft rise barely visible above the gentle undulation of the sea. The sand is no longer dry, no longer warm. It shifts beneath your feet like silk being pulled away by invisible hands. You stand at the final breath of land, gazing out where the horizon has swallowed the edges. The birds are gone. The grasses have dipped beneath the tide. The sun, still tucked beyond the edge of night, is beginning to glow softly behind clouds. And then, like a lullaby reaching its final note, the last exposed patch of sand gives in. The island disappears, not violently, not sadly, just peacefully, like a breath exhaled, a word finished, a story gently closed. And you're left floating, not adrift, but embraced by a quiet that feels almost sacred. It's as though the sea is holding a memory, and you're wrapped within it. The water now, everywhere around you, is calm, but beneath its surface lies the ghost of the island, still solid, still present. Its shape remains even if it no longer rises above the waves, and so too do all its living parts, the plants, the burrowing creatures, the microorganisms dancing in tidal currents. They don't panic, they don't scatter. They wait. They know this rhythm. It's part of their design. And as the island rests beneath the water, you begin to realize it hasn't disappeared. It's only transformed. Because the island is never one thing. It's sand and sea. It's memory and presence. It's visible then invisible. Real then imagined. And that's what gives it strength. Not permanence, but reliability. There's something beautiful about that kind of consistency. About returning again and again, even after vanishing. About trusting the tides not as a threat, but as a partner. And that too lives in you. You are not fixed. You shift. You evolve. Parts of you submerge old dreams, past selves, hopes once held, and then at the right time you rise again, changed, softened, smoothed by waves you didn't even realize had touched you. The island reminds you that returning isn't about reclaiming exactly what was. It's about becoming what's next. Above the first streaks of morning color kiss the clouds, pale rose, lavender, a touch of gold near the horizon. The light doesn't rush in. It stretches gently as if unsure whether to wake the world just yet. You close your eyes and float in the moment. The water is warm now, or perhaps your body has simply adapted. The sea feels like an extension of the sky, an endless dome of hush. In the distance, maybe a kilometer away, you glimpse the silhouette of another shoal, perhaps a sister island, perhaps just a sandbar. It too will rise when its time comes. You wonder how many islands are out here blinking in and out of view like celestial bodies in a tidal orbit. How many stories live just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to be seen? How many parts of you are like that? Soft, quiet, submerged, not gone, but resting. And isn't it comforting to know the island doesn't need to announce its return? It simply shows up in its own time. The tide recedes, the sand rises, and it begins again. Always. The sun begins to crest now, its golden light filtering across the waves, like the slow opening of an eyelid. You drift in the shallows where the island once stood, feeling the hush of daybreak replace the hush of night. It is a soft trade, no fanfare, just the steady warmth of a new chapter. As the tide begins its long, slow pull away from shore, you start to notice something remarkable. The island is already thinking of returning. A subtle rise here, a ripple of sand there. The faintest memory of form returning beneath the surface. You can't see it fully yet, but you can sense it. a texture beneath the toes, a cool density where the water flows differently. These are the island's first whispers coming back into being. You picture this process unfolding not just over hours, but across days, weeks, even years. Because this vanishing island isn't just at the mercy of the tide, it's part of a far longer story, one written by sediment, transport coastal currents, and seasonal wind patterns. Yes, it disappears every high tide, but it also shifts, migrates, reforms over time. Entire sandbanks have been known to move kilometers from their original positions over the course of a few seasons, guided gently by longshore drift. You think of the sand itself now, the very particles beneath you. Each grain tells a story of ancient mountains, broken down over millennia, carried by rivers, tumbled by ocean waves. Granite, quartz, shell fragments, coral dust all mixed together into this canvas of softness beneath your body. It's humbling to think how far each tiny grain has traveled to become part of this place, and even more humbling to realize they never truly stop moving. The island is never fixed in the same coordinates. It doesn't stake a permanent claim. It flows with nature's intentions, reshaped by currents, realigned by wind, reimagined by wave. Yet it always returns recognizably itself, even if slightly different each time. You wonder now how many times in your own life have you returned to something or someone changed, but still you, an old hobby rekindled, a friendship mended, a piece of yourself rediscovered. Perhaps the island is showing you how to move forward while circling back, how to evolve and still remain true. You begin to wade toward where the highest ridge of sand will soon re-emerge. There, beneath the glitter of retreating water, tiny bubbles rise, a sign of oxygen release from life beneath. The island's breath returning with the tide. The coquina clams are stirring again, the ghost crabs testing the edge of their burrows. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear it, the faint sound of sand shifting, organizing, readying itself for another few hours above water. This isn't just rebirth, it's resilience in rhythm. You smile, feeling the energy of the earth at your feet. It's quiet, yes, but powerful. The ocean doesn't need to roar to change the world. Sometimes it sculpts land with nothing but repetition. 1,000 soft waves shaping cliffs, carving caves, raising islands. And the island doesn't rise with noise or ego. It doesn't need to be permanent to matter. It just comes back. Over and over, without asking permission, without demanding attention. That kind of persistence, it's enough. The sun is higher now, painting the surface of the sea with bronze and honey. The water warmer. The first breeze of morning brushes your skin. And beneath the surface, the island begins to lift once more. You sit in the shallows once more, the water just barely grazing your waist now. Around you, the first signs of the island's return flicker into view. Sandbars peeking through the foam, a small rise near where the grasses had taken root. Even the returning calls of seabirds circling overhead, drawn once again by the promise of landing. It's quiet, quieter than night somehow. The world holds its breath, as if watching the birth of something sacred. And maybe it is. Because even though this place has risen countless times, before every return feels like a miracle. A moment that defies the idea that disappearance must mean the end. You trail your fingers through the water. It sparkles faintly in the morning light. The tide continues its slow withdrawal, stretching the edges of the island outward, like a painter laying the first strokes of a masterpiece. This is the intertidal resurrection, the daily rebirth of a place that doesn't cling to permanence. It simply is, again and again, and with that return comes renewal. You spot the first tiny tracks in the sand, left by a fiddler crab, emerging with comically oversized claws. He pauses, tilts his body as if sensing your presence, then scuttles away toward a deeper burrow. his job already begun, aerating the soil, feeding the sediment, helping the ecosystem rebuild from the bottom up. Soon after, a pair of sandpipers land their beaks, tapping rhythmically across the wet surface. They're here for breakfast, no doubt tiny invertebrates that the tide left behind, neatly deposited in shallow pools. Nothing wasted, everything transformed. You begin to walk now barefoot across the damp stretch. You can feel the land returning beneath you, firm, textured, familiar. And yet, subtly changed. The contours have shifted. The pool you sat beside earlier is gone. In its place, a new hollow has formed. It makes you realize the island never returns exactly as it was. It can't. It evolves with each cycle. The shape changes. The surface rearranges. But its essence remains the way it welcomes. The birds catches the sun, holds the weight of your step without protest. And somehow that's even more comforting than permanence. Because to return despite change, that's strength, that's hope. You stand at the highest point once more, your shadow stretching long across the wet sand. The sea, now a shimmering blue plate, glistens with invitation. It has done its part, wrapped the island in sleep, then delivered it back to waking. You pause and ask yourself, what might you allow to return gently in your own life? Not by forcing, not by controlling, but by trusting the rhythm. What have you submerged, thinking it was lost, that might rise again in a new light? Perhaps some version of yourself is ready to return now, newly shaped, tender, but real, rising quietly like sand from the sea. Because we are all a little like this island. Soft but strong, changed by tides, returned by grace. And as you gaze across this delicate stretch of reappeared earth, you no longer see fragility. You see faith. Faith in cycles, in rhythm, in rebirth. The birds agree. They've returned without hesitation. And the plants, their shoots already glisten with dew and seawater soaking in the light. The island is back, not as it was, but as it is. And you are too. Now as the sun climbs higher, casting long golden fingers across the island's damp skin, everything begins to slow. The tide has pulled back fully, but even in return the world moves gently. The sand is warm again. The air is soft and salted. And the birds' calls seem quieter now, as if they too are settling in for a restful moment before flight resumes. You lie down one last time, your head cradled by the sand, and you feel the quiet pulse of the earth beneath you. Not urgent, not loud, just there, steady like a lullaby, woven into the fabric of the ground itself. There is nothing to do now, no more waves to watch, no edges to chase. Only this, your breath slow and even matching the distant rhythm of the sea. The island is here. You are here. And even though both will shift, again, disappear, and return, you are connected by this moment held softly in its stillness. If you've enjoyed this journey, I'd be quietly grateful if you'd give this video a like or tap that subscribe button for more peaceful explorations with the Sleepy Scientist. It helps more than you might imagine. And before you drift off, I'd still love to know, where in the world are you listening? From what time it is there? Leave a comment if you're feeling cozy enough to share. It's always a quiet joy to see this sleepy little community ripple across time zones and continents. Good night, sweet dreams.